Welcome to Friday Live for January. This is the first show of the year. We had a really good show last month with maybe 12 or so of our community featuring different apps and things like that. And I got a lot of comments afterwards about everybody's talking about all the really cool things. So thanks for anybody who's on the call today who shared some stuff last week or last month. This month we're going to be talking about the main thing is our version 3 of our base code in our FM BetterForms editor. We'll be talking about our AI assistant, and we also have some questions and answers. And if we have some time, we'll dive into some more AI related things. Towards the end of our show, we'll have our draw if you're around for that. And if you've pre-registered, I think we usually do the cutoff around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning or so. And if you pre-registered for that, you'll be eligible for that. We just sent our last batch of swag, just went out the other day. So kind of do them in batches every few months because it's kind of labor intensive. I want to tell you about some of the events coming up. We have Engage Austin will be there, some of the team, and that's in March. We're just talking about this before the show started, and you get so much benefit out of these events. It's not even, for me personally anyway, it's not even about going to the actual conferences talks. It's just talking to people, talking to other developers, other business owners, other consultants, and so on. Elevate FM is a new conference. It is going to be a 1-day plus training workshop conference in Toronto, our hometown here. It's put on by Alexis Allen of FM Design University. And the actual dates, I think, are May 27th and 28th. I'm not positive on that, so you may have to check that out. It's pretty inexpensive. It's like only $299 Canadian, so that's like, I don't know, 230, 40 bucks US or something like that. So it's pretty inexpensive conference for a day of talks. Our UX designer Pearson's going to be talking at one of the conference or one of the sessions. There's only 7 or 8 sessions for the daytime, I believe. I'm not sure if she's going to add anything else onto that. If you are planning on attending that, let us know, and we'll organize an FM BetterForms separate meetup, and we'll sponsor some kind of an event for that. Vienna Calling's coming up, and this is the continuation of .fmp. .fmp stopped last year, was the last one, and that ran for I think 11, 12 years. A really, really good conference. Really, if you like getting into technical stuff and just talking pure technical aspects, that's the conference to go to. I think of all of them. And depending where you live, it's a pretty reasonable cost. For us Canadians here, it's just as easy to go there as to go down to Austin. It's only an extra couple hours or so. So that works out well. And finally, I want to tell you about Build, Grow, Learn. This is a new conference. We went to this last year, and we're having, I think, 3 people going to it this year. It is a business-oriented conference, and I wish I would have been forced to go to one of these kinds of conferences, say maybe 10 years ago, because all of the takeaways we didn't implement, we're still implementing stuff, and we're finally starting to get some of these concepts of systems and business development techniques integrated into our company. So that's a really good conference. There's a little bit of FileMaker stuff, but it's not really Claris is an official sponsor, and there is a beginner track that has stuff, but I don't think it would apply to anybody here. But the other 2 sides, all the professional stuff, the marketing related things, exit plans, they're talking about how to go about Joe Scarpetta last year gave a talk on how to scope out a client, those types of things. Really good talks there. I think there's going to be an AI panel and things like that as well that we'll be probably volunteering some stuff with. One quick thing I want to mention, we do have some new pricing, and I mentioned this last month as well. I'm going to see if I can pull this up. And our new pricing plans have changed just slightly. We'll be grandfathering the other plans in. Madeleine in accounting will be announcing a new grandfathering clause over the next quarter or so for everybody. But it'll be super generous, I'm sure. It's only $395 for a citizen developer plan and $1195. So those are about 33% cheaper than they were in the past, and they fit our clientele or typical use cases a lot better. If you have any questions about that, let me know. We are running a promo on right now. It's not advertised on the site. It's just for existing people who've talked to us in the past. And the promo is going to be on while we have the version 3 of our editor in beta. I want to hand things over to Hassan, who's going to talk about some product updates, and we'll jump right into things.
Hey guys, good morning. I'll take over here and kind of show some updates that we've had. Again, I'd suggest everyone to head over to our changelog over from help and see the changelog over here to see any updates to keep up to date with what we're doing. The major updates this month are the D&D now has AI support available. So if you head into a D&D page over here and you click the AI assistant at the top, you will now be allowed to use AI over here to help you over here. Charles will demonstrate that. There's a lot of cool tricks going on over there. Next, another major thing is the preview on templates have been fixed. There's been 2 changes with the templates. So if I go over here to add a new page, the preview shows up the page a lot better so you can see what it's doing. In addition to that, we've added 3 new V3 templates for the GUI editor. So next time you get started building in there, you can use these. Lastly, there's been a lot of GUI editor bug fixes and some miscellaneous bug fixes. I'd recommend reading through these to see if any of these affect you as well, and we'll continue updating those. Additionally, there is a known issues section up here above. When there are known issues that arise, we will keep this updated as well. Right, and that's all for the BetterForms updates this month. Pass that back to Charles. You're just muted over there, Charles.
Awesome. Thanks, Hassan. I want to talk about our latest version of FM BetterForms and where we're moving with the platform. So we're going to jump in, and you'll notice that over the past maybe week or so, you'll see a new banner, and this will periodically show up in your UI, announcing our new drag and drop editor. This is something that we've been working on for a while, and we're at the point now that it has pretty much feature parity, plus a much higher ease of use. I've had the opportunity to onboard 5 or 6 new developers with our drag and drop interface, and it's been significantly easier for them to create layouts and things like that. As an experienced developer, you're so accustomed to you're not foreign anymore to editing JSON. When we started in 2016, I think we went public-ish with the product, 2017, something like that. About 25% of our community was using JSON. And now it's pretty much 95+% are comfortable with editing stuff. But nonetheless, the reason we have JSON under the hood in BetterForms is because it allows us to be dynamic. It's a data-driven interface. So what I want to do is I want to have a look at our some of the updates that we've made since the last time we've talked about this and sort of officially release this. We're pretty excited about it. We have created, if you want to play around with it, but you don't want to create any apps in your account, you can message Hassan on the chat channel and give him your email address, and he'll invite you into this public playground. This is a shared account. And one of the main differences is the new drag and drop editor runs on version 3 of our base code, and this version supports a number of different things. The main one is nested grouping. So that means objects can be inside other objects, and you can keep building that interface downward. In order to be able to use the editor, you will have to select under the domains, you'll have to select BF Staging V3 used for V3 editor. So you will have to select that in your apps. I will give you a quick caveat. There is an addendum or a note, engineering note document that outlays all of the known issues and everything that you should be concerned with. Please make sure you read that. Don't just start changing your production apps like anything. You have to be kind of responsible that way. There are some limitations. It doesn't, as an operating system, it runs almost identical. We actually have had our editor here running on version 3 for about 6 months or so now. But there are some limitations. Okay, so once I have my base code set to version 3, then BetterForms will automatically route you to the new version of the editor. Otherwise, you'll receive the old editor. If for any reason you do need to use the legacy editor, you can actually access it over on the right-hand side from the actions options page here. And what I'll do is I'm going to search for my own page here. Actually, let's go dashboard. I see, I'm going to copy one of these, duplicate one of these pages for myself here. We have updated some of the templates, and over the next next month or so, we'll update more templates. Actually, this is not the one I wanted here. Let me just see if I can find that. All right. We've updated a number of the templates. The main ones are the questionnaire template just got updated, and the client portal template has gotten updated as well. So Hassan in the past, I think, has demoed some of this part of the editor, but I want to sort of actually look at how we go about building things and what the main differences are. So as you can see, first thing is that we can see everything, right? Which is always a bonus. We still have access to the old schema if you want to go that way. I've managed to build a couple sites now, and I have not touched anything in the schema at all. So we're pretty much there. Here we have sections, the ability to name the sections and to group items. For example, this is this is a BetterForms component. So if you have used any components, you can access those components and drag them on here. And if you wanted to. And within that component, we can also access the layers or the grouping. So we can see what that component is sitting inside. In this case, it's sitting inside another group. Groups can actually be renamed. So if I have a group here, sometimes when I'm looking on my tree, I don't really know what group we're actually talking about. So if we double click this, we can actually change this, and we'll call it header. And you can see it's updated over on the side here. So now I have my header group. I have things like buttons and so on. So what I want to do is I want to actually go and maybe play around with this layout. For example, we have these, and I'm going to actually get rid of some of these here. And we'll get rid of a couple of those just for a second. So I have this group here, and I want to add some elements or some components to it. So let's say, for example, we wanted to add HTML. We can search for an HTML element, and we can drag it into the group. There it is there. And now if we want to make an edit to that, we can use some shortcut keys. Command H or Control H on PC will allow us to edit, and we can still use our AI editor here as well. So let's say we wanted to make let me just see what I have in my data here. Metrics, okay. I want to show those metrics maybe in a different form. So I'm going to open up my AI assistant, create a panel that will show my metrics in a colorful display. Let's try something like that. It's going to have a look at my data that's over in my data tab, and it'll start creating that metrics panel. Right, and that's pretty good. It's already wired up to my data here. I'm going to leave that at that as it is. And we're going to make a small change here. I don't really need this one here anymore. And I notice it's kind of squished up, right? That's not really the effect that I want. On the other screen, it was nice and big. So let's have a look and see why. If we look at our container that's sticking in, I can see that this one was set up as a grid. And I'm going to talk about, or I think we'll talk about these layout objects in just a few seconds here. And there we go. All right. So there's my header. And I want to talk a little bit next about how we go about managing styles. We used to go over to the schema, and we would look for a key called style classes, and we would manually add our styles into that. We haven't reduced any functionality at all with the new editor. So what we do now is almost exactly the same. I can see that this thing has some weird spaces on the side here, and I can see that there's padding on the x-axis. So I'm going to select that attribute and delete it. And now let's make some other changes. Maybe we can change our background color so we can edit these styles. BG hyphen, I'm going to say blue hyphen. Actually, let me do this first. I'm going to make one small change. I'm going to go into this HTML here and I'm going to remove this background. I can see it right here. So I'm just going to remove it manually just so we don't see it. And I can confirm that by just seeing that if I change the default background, that's handy when you're working with white elements. And I'm going to save that. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to add a background amount on the this entire group here. So let's add a little bit of padding here for a second, just all the way around so we can see the element. I still see that there's a drop shadow. Maybe we'll remove that later on. And now we can say background. We'll go sky hyphen. And you can see right away we have a list of all of the attributes. You can mouse over the attributes. So as I mouse over, real-time updating. So you can find the one that kind of fits. And it's like, I kind of like that one, but it's probably too dark. I know Pearson would probably scream at me for that. So I'll pick this lighter color here. And let's go and make some small changes. This panel that we created earlier on, it actually still has some shadowing. So I'll remove that as well. And I'm not sure where shadowing is, so I can say remove the card and shadow, but keep the content, something like that. We'll just let that update. Great. So it's removed the drop shadow, but it's kept the cards. Actually, I think I still want the cards around each metric. Add a card. And that was my own fault, actually. I shouldn't have removed everything because the card colors, and make them shades of pastel colors, something like this. Let's just see how that is. Put these back. Okay, so we don't have the big wrapper around it all. Okay, great. And obviously my background color, you can tell I'm not a designer, but that's okay. Let's change this to maybe a gray or a slate, which is like a cool gray. And we'll put it somewhere in there. I know, Pearson, you're rolling your eyes. All right. And that's basically the gist of things. Now, if I'm going to delete this whole element for a second, and later on, Hassan, I believe, is going to talk a little bit more about flexing and boxes and spacing and things like that. I want to look at our attributes and how we go about setting those now. So, for example, I have this table here. In the past, configuring tables were pretty complex because there's a lot of attributes that can be set here. And I think Pearson's done a really nice job with the UI. And this is a new update that most people haven't seen yet. So basically, I have a list of all my attributes down here, and we can go and we can edit, and we can also manually add all of those attributes. It's really just under the hood, adding it onto that JSON object, but it makes it a little easier. So you can see I have columns here. And maybe I don't need the amount of this invoice, so I can just delete that and the table updates right away. Any additional attributes that we want to add, we can manually add those. So for example, let me add something else on here, HTML. I'm just going to grab a HTML block again. I'm going to pop that in here. And let me just put some padding around that P4. There we go. So if I wanted to make this conditionally visible, this is HTML. You notice I don't have a visibility key here, but I can add one. And as soon as I do that, BetterForms already knows that that particular key is a Boolean, so I can toggle it on and off. And as I do that, you can see the item disappear as well. And if I wanted to make this a calculation, I'm just going to zoom in. I'm not sure if this, actually, I won't be able to zoom in on your screen. So I can make this a calculation as well. There's a function ability here, and then we can set this to a value. So for example, model dot is shown, something to that effect. And that would allow this this key to be bound to that visibility key. We need something else that would toggle that, of course. All right, so that's the attributes on the side. We talked about a little bit about the style classes. If you're really comfortable with style classes, I'm just going to give you an example here for a second. If you're really comfortable with style classes, I'm going to erase this and just put, this is HTML in here just for a second. Or maybe we'll make it hello world. All right. Okay. So if I'm really comfortable with style classes and I just want to enter them in, and we find most people get pretty comfortable after the first half an app or so. So I can just do that right away. Font, bold, and you'll see the preview right away. We haven't committed this. I haven't hit enter. Text 3XL and text sky 700, and we can keep going on here. Background sky 100, and as soon as I commit that, all of those classes automatically add. So that's really, really fast for if you have an idea of what you're trying to do really quickly, you can enter those in quick succession. Each individual one, if you just double click and you backspace, you can see all of the other attributes. So you say, okay, I want to adjust that a little bit, and I can just dial that in. We've separated the classes into categories to make it a little bit easier. There are some discrepancies in some of the categories. For example, I think margin shows up in the visuals. Let me just see, actually, let's see. No, maybe I'm wrong. There's the odd class that is in the wrong spot. We'll dial those in shortly. But it makes it really, really easy to see what's happening there. Next, I want to talk about AI and some of the things that we've added in here. And I'm going to actually use a project that I'm personally working on. So I will exit this. And this is just an internal tool. It's a tool that we're building just to be able to develop quicker, because when you're working with AI, a lot of the stuff is in prompts, and our prompts are pretty big. They're somewhere typically between 3 and 22K of prompting. That's a lot of prompt and that we're sending along. And we need that because we have to tell the AI a lot about your environment. We have to tell it about your model and all of these kinds of things. So this was this is actually, let me just change here, detail. This is a project that I'm working on. This is just, again, this is purely an internal tool. It's not meant for the public. It's not even super pretty. I thought it was quite good looking, but then Pearson made some really good points before our call today. So my tail's back between my legs again for my UX abilities. But the idea here is I have this interface, and it allows me to basically edit my stuff in my agents. So let me just give you an idea about what the app I'm building is, and then we can go. Okay, so this is the page that I'm actually editing. Now, I have built this app 100%, and my goal is to build this entire thing without touching a line of code. I haven't written any JavaScript. I've used the AI assistant. I haven't written any HTML, and I have not written any manually written any style classes or anything like that, or any CSS. So in this particular case, this is a detail record, and it allows me to, there's an editor here, and it allows me to do rich text, or markdown, I should say, of my template. This is a template for something we're working on here. And it also allows me to do some settings. Now, I did notice that when I look at my dev tools, my agent object here has some keys that are missing that are not in here. So I want to add those in. So the AI assistant opens up in modal mode, or undocked mode. And what I wanted to do is I want to, what keys in my agent model are not represented on my UX? So I'm going to ask the AI assistant about that for starters and see what it comes back with. I wonder if this is related to some API issue with OpenAI. We use OpenAI as a source, and it's a bit of a, I think it's becoming a bit of a love-hate relationship, and we'll probably second source our AI as we develop it further. Yeah, definitely, it's an issue on their side. Okay, so you can see it's come back and it said, okay, here are all the keys that are in my object, and I'll just wait till it's done here. And here are all the keys that are in my UX. So it's looked at the UX, it's looked at my data, and it says keys not represented in the UX code interpreter. So let's add that in. Okay, add code interpreter. And I think it's a Boolean. So I'm going to say add it in as a check, check box. Fortunately, OpenAI, this is for the past day and a half or so, there's been a number of incidents. This isn't on our side at all, but we'll give it a second because the other ones seem to take exceptionally long as well. Maybe it's the DeepSeek model is attacking the OpenAI model, and we're going to have some model wars. I don't know.
I heard it said ChatGPT is losing its job to AI.
All right, so it's coming back. It says to add these as a checkbox, and now what it's going to do is it's going to go in and it's going to edit the object. And you can tell it's grabbed the entire parent object. In this particular case, it will sometimes grab the singular object, or sometimes it'll grab the whole parent object. This is still in beta. We've only just released this or developed this about 3 weeks ago. So this is pretty new.
And one thing you didn't mention is, Charles, the way that column is changing, the one that's updating, selected and has like the shimmer over it, and that's the one that's being targeted.
Yeah.
New changes too.
Right. And as the API gets faster, as we get faster models, time will significantly decrease. It's still, even if you had to wait forever, it's still faster than what you can do manually. So unfortunately seems to be very slow right now. Okay, so it's just finished up, and here's my new code interpreter switch. So it's added this in and actually looked at the page and, of course, used a bit of common sense and it added a subject line or a description line as well, enable code interpreter for this AI agent. So I think that's pretty cool. I didn't have to do anything here. So let's look at some of the other elements here. There's model ID assistant. Actually, I have that up here. And I can't edit it, but I do have it. Code interpreter, ID assistant, the model, the top P. Let's add top P next. And I don't really know what kind of data the top P is. Well, I do. It's a diversity in the randomness. So it's going to go back through and it's going to add that into that object. The reason it has to select the entire parent object is you think about data structure. In order for it to put it inside, right now, the way we have this designed, and we'll maybe get a chance to talk about it later under the hood, is it has to rewrite this small chunk of code. The bonus here is that we're not actually updating the entire page. We're only updating that one element. And we also have an undo as well. So hopefully this one's a little bit quicker. There we go. So it's added top P in here and controls diversity. And then actually gave some help here. It says 0 for deterministic, 1 for more diverse. But let's have a look at I'm going to do this here for a second. Let's have a look at the actual attributes that it's set. I'm just going to move this over because my Zoom window. So it's set the minimum and maximum to the values. I didn't actually tell it to set the minimum and maximum, but it knows enough from the content of the page that this is a reasonable guesstimate. And the step, so that this is a numeric field input. So that means you can't see it here, but on the actual UI, I haven't saved it. But you'll see this up and down, right? So because it's in numeric, and you can also scroll. It's added a hint and the label, of course, as well. We can do other things too, like you can say, here, let me do this one here. My description does not need to be required, but it is. Can you remove that? And it does have some awareness of the context of your active element, but it's not going to take it into full consideration because you may be talking about something else. But if you just say this element, it will know which one it is. And there you go. And it's removed the required settings there. You can also add things like visibility when this is on, make this visible and and so on. And I've actually done that here on my I'm going to close this. I've done that here where I have two panels, one here and one edit. This is my reading panel, and this is my my editing panel. And this, you might look at this editor and say, hey, I've never seen that editor. And up until I built this, I'd never seen this editor either. I'm just going to save my work here, and I'll show you what I did. I searched for an editor that allows me to write Markdown and have it visually displayed so you can see the objectives is bigger and so on. We don't have one built in BetterForms, and there's not even a view component for one. So I just searched for one, and I said to the AI here, oops, sorry, scripts on upload. Oh, I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think where I added it in here. Okay, I added it in here. All right, and in my settings somewhere, I'm trying to look for where I added this element or this this. Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry, my bad. So I said take this editor. It's not a view component, wrap it and turn it into a view component so I can just plop it in anywhere I want. And it wrote this code here. You can tell because it comments, and it was done. It actually took a regular component, wrapped it, created a view component, stuck it in here. So I didn't write any of that code either. I think that's pretty cool. I think there's just one more thing here to talk about, and then I'm going to flip it over to Hassan to talk a little bit more about positioning objects and things. Talked about the style classes. Oh, one last thing here is buttons. And you'll notice some of the classes will have an extra attribute over here. You can see style here and you can see button. And if I want to manually set the classes for the button, I can do that here. So this way we can target that separately. Technically, that's all inside the JSON, but it's really not nice here. So we've brought it out and brought it into this UI here. If you do have suggestions while you're using things, there's a report a bug feature, and that really, really does help us because all of those get triaged into our internal system. And, you say something like this or something like that or whatever it is, and you can annotate it up. Mine will look a little different and report that. We look at all of those, we triage them, and we adjust and code accordingly. Any questions about anything so far? D&D stands for drag and drop.
Yeah, there's a bunch of questions answered on those. I think Alessandro actually has a new question. It's complicated to duplicate a project that I have and update to V3 to make some tests. So he wants to duplicate an existing project he has and update to V3. I believe you could just push that into a new environment and change that environment to V3.
Exactly. We have instructions for that, so you just follow the notes, and it's right in that banner. There's a link to that. We'll maybe paste that in later on. And as Hassan said, the main difference is you just duplicate this and then change it to V3. Incidentally, if you're not making saves, you can just change. If you have you should have a proper development and production environment. Even if you don't in FileMaker, do it in BetterForms always. And take that production environment or the development environment, you can make that change. It won't hurt anything. You can roll it back. You can also, if you have a and any of the pages that you modify, you can go into the rollback history and roll those back as well. So prior to the date. So, but be meticulous when you're working on it. It's like anything. Even FileMaker server, you go and, you shouldn't be doing your updates into into production with the most recent version in case there's an issue. Always wait a little bit, right?
Alessandro, you can just move your production page into a different environment, like clone it over back as well. But I have pasted the what you should be reading. Oh, I paste into everyone. Before starting with the D&D editor, just make sure you go over this document.
Great. I'm going to stop my share here.
Yeah, and I'll take over right here.
Super.
So I'm kind of going to do a basic introduction since a lot of people are still new to the D&D editor and how you should kind of go about doing things. So I'll start by adding an HTML block over here. And if there's any questions along the way, feel free to jump in and ask as well. But I kind of want to go along, how would you change stuff? We recommend people use Tailwind CSS very often, but it can be daunting at first. There's a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of things to learn. But another way that Charles even showed over here is what you can do if you want to change something. For example, I write text. So what I can do is I can just click the down arrow key and see all the different text sizes and see what fits for what I want it to do. This is an easy way to get familiar with the classes and see what they're doing. So maybe I want to do text 3XL, and I can just click into there. And the same applies for other stuff like font. I can see the different font options I have available. I can see like the different weights. Maybe I want it to be semi-bold like this, or bold, and we can change it right over here. And that's just an introductory way of how to get used to things. And when you do type text, you can also see all the different options you have available, like such as all the different colors. So make sure you make use of this. Well, the main thing I wanted to show today was kind of flexing in groups. So I'm going to drag over a group over here. Let's drag this group in. And let's do a scenario that's very common. I'll put in 2 input fields in the group. Okay, now we have a group over here with 2 input fields. A very common one is you kind of want to put them together. So what you do is you write flex. And now we kind of want to divide them a little bit. So let's put a space between them. Again, I can go down and see how much space I kind of want between them. It is responsive, so it'll keep growing bigger. So let's do space x8. And I can just click enter in there and get that added on. Now, a big thing is, how do I get these both to fill the width as well? That's another big thing. And another big thing is, how do you center them? That happens very often. So I'm going to write over here, justify. And I see there's a bunch of things that come up over here. Now, what I recommend a lot of people do is do this exact same scenario that I have set up 2 things inside of a group and go through all the justify options. So you can see all the different ways you can style something. There's justify end, justify center is the one we use probably the most. Justify between is also used a lot when you want 2 things on opposite ends. And this is very useful for mobile designs as well, because this is pretty responsive when you're using Flex. So I'd recommend just going through all of these options. But for now, let's just leave it at justify normal. And now another big thing is kind of having 2 things fill up the same width. So how would you go about that? There's 2 options actually. So you can do width full, where you can apply width full onto both elements. That's one way of doing it. But another way that's actually better than doing width full, because the problem with width full is it makes both elements take the full width inside of the parent. A better way to do it, if you want to, like, so for example, if they're flex crawl over here, they're both filling in the whole space. Another way of doing this, instead of doing width full, is you can actually, so let me delete this, put in flex 1. So putting in flex 1 makes it so it takes up all the space that it can. And this distributes the space more equally. Where this is handy is, for example, if you're making a form and say you want to have a postal code. Postal codes usually are, or like state. Those are usually like about 100 or 200 pixels. So what often happens is I'll do like width 200 pixels, because those are usually fairly small. By applying flex 1 here, this is a lot more responsive when you're shrinking your screen. Because the postal code size, for example, if this, let me change the name here. Oh, one. Oh. Yeah, because now over here, the other one shrinks accordingly when you go to a mobile screen. And the postal code that's going to always be like, for example, 6 characters, that'll always stay the correct size that you want it to. So these are just some introductory tips that I wanted to make sure everyone knew of. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hassan.
Yep.
Okay, Hassan, can you back to the it's HTML drag and drop? This is HTML.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
in HTML, we can also drag these on. Yep.
Okay, and how can I make a conditional style with the drag and drop? Is it possible to do it?
So for example, adding colon classes.
Yeah.
What do,
Yeah,
what
for
do you mean by traditional style?
He was asking about conditional styles, so adding like a
conditional.
colon class.
Sorry.
Conditional style.
Yeah, so in the HTML over here, you can click the editor and use the same old colon class in here as well. In terms of doing it on the outside, I believe some elements over here, for example, they do have like calc options over here. You see this icon over here, the Thunderbolt. You can click those and they will turn into calcable fields as well. But that might be one thing to note to make it directly from the styles. Maybe we should have some sort of way to have the colon classes here.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Styles is a calculation, and often we have to do that. It's typically inside the HTML rather than in the wrapper element, though. For example, I want to put a label, and I have different types of statuses, and it might be pending, approved, canceled, or paid, or something like that. And I would normally style those up right around the individual elements, and those elements are probably dynamic as well. So we wouldn't have separate physical layout items.
Usually you would want to do something like this, where you just put it inside of the element, you'll do your colon class. And if to a lot of people who aren't too familiar with HTML, this might be a little tricky for you to see. This is how you can kind of, depending on what's in your model or what metrics or something you have, you can add JavaScript and then add your class conditionally. I will recommend you can just use the AI assistant for this. It's very helpful at these things. You don't need to know how to do this. You can just tell it, hey, when my status is this, can you make the color that, and so on. So that's a good way of doing it instead. Right? Are there any other questions before we move on to Charles again? All right, I'll leave it at that. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat as well, and we'll make sure to answer those. All right, pass that back over to Charles.
Awesome, thanks. So we went through a couple things here. We got a bunch of things in the editor, and it's interesting because as much of the stuff I build, I never think of postal code being a fixed the phone numbers for sure. I never thought about the zips or postal codes. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, because those are always like 6 characters, so you never
Yeah,
want them to be too big. So that one's come up a lot.
Just touching base on what Prana was asking about conditional. Use the AI for everything like that. I'm gonna be honest with you, I quite adapt and I can code fairly well some days, but I use the AI all the time, and I've outsourced all of that brain power. And if you do find something's not working, explain to the AI, say, hey, this isn't working. This is what I'm seeing. Something that you may not realize that you can do with the AI as well. Let me just jump back into that playground again. Oh, sorry, sandbox. Is you can give it, Charles Groups, I'll use this one here. You can give the AI a photo. We're pretty actively working on increasing the AI's ability with BetterForms. It's as powerful as the external AIs, and we're pretty good now. This is currently version 2 of our AI. We're working on a much deeper version. It's a lot more complex, but it's going to have a lot more features. It's what they call multi-agentic workflow and things like that. But we haven't released that yet because we're still building out that framework. Once we do, we'll make that open source for everybody as well. But I just want to go into the concept of using images. So if I go to Mobbin, I think it is Mobbin. This is a website of UX designs, and there's all kinds of different things. Let's go to screens, web, I should say, apps, and I see certain things. And if I see something that I think is interesting, I want something that actually is logically makes sense. Let's look at this thing here. All right, here is some UI for something. I'm not sure what it is exactly. It's got a ton of icons, and I want to reproduce something like that. I can do this in sections. I'm going to delete some of my groups here, and I'm just going to use this HTML block here. And I want to let's take a screenshot, and I want to reproduce this part, let's say. Actually, you know what? Let's just go for it here. This is Airbnb. Probably better to use the real site, better resolution, but let's see how this comes out. I'm going to copy this, and you've seen me do this before. We'll open up the AI assistant. I'm going to paste this in and create this interface, right? And we'll start with just something like that. One of the things you notice is it put digital matter in the top corner. So it actually reproduced the logo. It looked into our app model and it got that logo out. All right. Now it's not bad. It's not bad, but I really need, let me just save this, and the images are not there. So let me just save this. Oops. Save this for a second. And this is what I got so far. Let's delete that. So there's my interface. Now, I'm going to jump over to my data model, and it says invoices. I'm going to delete this. And I am going to jump back into my AI assistant. Create my development and default data models to drive this page. So the AI is going to look at the picture again, and let's see what it comes up with. And if you think about that image or that stuff, I had fake data images. I had whatever those were, houses and things like that. So right now it's creating the default data model, and it's creating the listings. It actually has a selected listing over here in the development data model, an empty object. It's already scaffolded out the empty object that I need. So that's pretty good. So let me save that. Now it's not connected to my data yet, right? This is still not really connected to anything. Incidentally, let's just look quickly over here. And if you notice, these images are actual Unsplash images. So we'll check those out in a second. Let's go back into here and select that. And we'll open that up, and I'm going to say, this UI is static. I want to connect it to my development data. And let's refix that now. Now, of course, that development data, that's really your FileMaker development data. But we find that BetterForms works best when you just start building the UI first, get that more or less done, and then connect it up to the back end. You can do them at the same time if
Hey,
you want.
Charles,
Which
you're talking to your AI.
Blurring away here. Sorry. That's my bad. Blabbing too much. Sorry, guys. I didn't hit enter. There we go. Right. So now what it'll do is it's actually use those images that we got earlier on. So BetterForms went off and fetched, when I developed this sample data, it used Unsplash with, basically tried to match up the themes a little bit. It's got some purple house in there, and living room session with Doja Cat and so on. So it's matched the images trying to get close to the design. Save that. And now we've got the top part within about 5 minutes of a page that's actually real, right? We can go on, and I would actually do a bit more here. I would say split these into separate. Let's try this. We haven't dialed this in yet, but I'm going to just go for it anyway. Split the top section and the icon section and the listings into separate BetterForms elements. Later on, we'll have the ability to just drop in a picture and build up the whole thing. But let's see what happens. Let's see how it comes out. And hopefully we don't blow up. After the smoke clears. So this is something we're just dialing in right now. We don't have a special guide for it. So let's, yeah, it's not actually done yet, but I think I think there's a mistake in there somewhere. So having said that, we have an undo button if that happens. One of the ways, if you are doing something like this and you want to split it up into elements, select the element, just duplicate the element, and then delete pieces out. And that's how I split it up sometimes. But I have been successful in that. That's another feature that we just thought of the other day about splitting the elements, joining the elements, and so on. And it's actually made it responsive as well. So I think that's pretty sweet. You could go continue now to dial in the interface and say, hey, I want to change this to this way and change that way and so on. Any questions about any of this stuff so far?
Charles, can you use AI for for making a JavaScript function?
Yes. Yeah, so let's do that. Let me do something here. Actually, we don't even need a button. Let's go over to script workspace. And I'll create a new script, demo, and function. Oops, get that out of the way, function. There. So we edit JavaScript exactly the same way. The AI from the top level of this page is the next area that we'll work on, so that we can actually have the AI completely write the functions. We've just started the development of working on those things there now, and the ability for the AI to more fully understand this concept. But from in here, you can definitely do that. So let me just see what's in my data model. If there's something interesting, listings. Okay. Take my model listings array and sort them by alphabetically and put them in a listing sorted array. So you can do things like okay, well, it's okay. It's cut off a little bit. I didn't let my Mac finish dictating. Yeah, there's compatibility issue. This is something we'll fix over the next couple of days. But normally you can do this from here. You can do this on your regular editor. It's just the new editor has a different naming convention, and it looks like the AI is not streaming into it properly. But you can definitely do this, and we'll fix this one up in the next release, the next couple of days. The AI assistant does have knowledge of the models, the data models, development data, the default data. It has knowledge of your schema and knowledge of your action script names. So for example, you could say, what action scripts do I have? Right. It also knows about all the pages that are in your app. You can ask it, what other pages do I have? We've just recently added the ability to say things, and this is not tested out, so I shouldn't really be demoing this, but you can say, go to the other page and fetch the logo that I'm using on my these are actions, but on my XYZ page, and put that on the top of this page, and it'll do that. It'll go fetch that code and bring it over for you. So it's starting to become fairly powerful in that sense. If you do see it doing these function calls or getting additional data, it's just fetching additional stuff. And it also has full knowledge, of course, we've talked about this in the past, but a full knowledge of all of our docs and our forums as well. So you can see here's all the pages that are in the app. Any other questions about anything? Well, I think what we'll do is I'm going to pause on this subject, and I wanted to talk a little bit about DeepSeek, because this is all the talk. And oh, actually, even before we do that, we should jump in. My bad. We should jump in. We did have some community questions, mostly about OAuth, and maybe we can just address those. Dean, I'm not sure if Dean's on the call, but he had asked about OAuth and using it with accessing Zoom. And Eduardo, you had found some information on that, I believe.
Yes, so then OAuth doesn't have like what they call usually the social connections like ready, but there's some ways of doing that. I have these 3 links I could share with you, I guess. I'm just gonna put on the chat here for everyone. So this is their community. One of their users asked that, and they answered with 2 possible solutions for that. Let me get here. This is the post. And then like this is not something I've tested or tried myself, but
Eduardo, sorry to interrupt you. Where did you post it?
yeah. I'm gonna post on the chat
Oh,
here
okay, gotcha.
in the media chat. Yeah.
Right. So
But
you're
according
saying
to Auth0, they say it's possible.
right.
Yeah.
So Auth0 doesn't normally out of the box support Zoom, but there's some hacks that you can do to make it work.
Yeah, there's 2 different ways, yes.
Super. So the bonus here is we had support for identity providers like Auth0 and Okta and Google. So by connecting to Auth0, they have about 50 or 60 or so out of the box connectors that you can connect things up. But there's some hacks that, because Zoom is not one of them, but there's some hacks that you can use to access that directly. OAuth with multiple logins was asked by somebody as well. It's a lot of OAuth. And was it Hassan? Was it you who just did an OAuth with multiple logins?
No, but I believe Prana's on the call here, and for Akimed, you guys are setting up OAuth with multiple different logins. Prana, maybe you can weigh in on that, because I believe you guys have that ready.
Not yet, Hassan. Yeah, we are still working in progress.
Okay, but yeah, I know with Auth0, you can set up multiple logins. I've seen people do it in BetterForms apps before. I haven't done it myself in a long time with Auth0, but Auth0 does allow you to use different logins.
Yeah, you should be able to just where the they call it the I don't want to log in on the Zoom here publicly into my Auth0 account just because it shows all the stuff. But there's a setting where you can select which providers are enabled. And I think it's like a little toggle switch. It's about the 3rd item down, and it's over here somewhere. And you can enable multiple ones, and that should work properly right out of the box.
Great, I'll check that out.
Right, and there's links. Make sure you bookmark these links here. It looks like there's a bit of hoops to jump through, mostly configuration and
But most likely the first, like the second link, I guess, the Zoom SSO with the XML thing should work better in this case, because the other option they give, yeah, it might probably need some changes in our base code. So I'm not sure on that second solution, but the other one might work.
This is an app I built a long time ago, like 7 years ago or 6 years ago or something like that. And it uses GitHub for authentication. And the next question was about debugging OAuth. There's a little bit of it can be a little bit tricky to debug OAuth. Looks like there's a broken image in this slideshow here. But basically, when I click the sign in, the first thing we're watching for is you're going to see up in this URL there, this URL here. And we want to basically look at the beginning of the URL to see if it's malformed or some parts are repeating or something, because that could indicate that you have bad settings in BetterForms. In this case, this is under our Auth0 account under BetterForms, Auth0/user login. And then I would just log in. I continue with GitHub. I'm logged in. And it looks like actually there is an error. So Grant, missing session.
This is an error that happens. This is not a real error. If you go back, I think it's something on auth end. I don't know what it is, but if you go back once more and try again, it'll probably work.
Yeah, this is
I've
interesting.
seen this error before with auth. I'm not exactly sure what's coming from it or what end it's on.
Any
But
thoughts
when
on?
you try again, it usually works.
So there's two parts of URLs. The URL that goes to Auth0, and then when it calls back to BetterForms. You don't really see it here because it goes pretty quick, but let me see if I can go backwards here. So there's a first URL that goes over to here. I click continue, and then there's another URL. And if there is an error, you'll see it right in this one here. And then it forwards on to the actual site. So by looking at the URLs, you can usually see what's misconfigured. The best advice I can give you on debugging is to post what you're seeing on the return paths or the going there paths, and hopefully the team can help you out a little bit. It's usually just a wrong key entered in the settings. And if you're wondering where you configure OAuth settings, they're done underneath your. Let's save this actually. Save my cat hotel. They're done underneath your app settings here. And so from there's an authentication page. I think it's okay. Oh yeah, that's not good. All right, well, it's okay. It's this app doesn't matter anyway. I can roll it because maybe we'll do that right now. And once you do that, once you check the settings, so under here, I'm going to have to generate a new key now because I flashed that on the screen. Well, I flashed that one too. I'll do it later on. But underneath authentication settings, you automatically can enter your stuff in there. I think that was it for questions for those ones, unless anybody else had any other community questions, and we'll jump on to the next thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on the multiple logins. I am, and I'm just looking for guidance and thoughts if there's any. I'm looking for supporting clients that have their own Zoom account. So by multiple logins, I'm not looking about multiple logins for me, but allowing them to log in. And then, of course, you keep track of that data and the keys expiring and those sorts of things. But if there's any insight anybody's got, that would be helpful.
So I personally log in with my Google account. Are you looking?
I don't care.
Like-
I'm looking to service customers and I need to access their Zoom data. And so they need to give me app-to-app OAuth login so that I can access the data.
So that means within your application, you say connect to my Zoom account and you get an auth key, OAuth grant to their app, and you'll hang on to that internally and then you'll do a backend.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Got you.
So I think that's just a database management thing.
So,
but if there's any
so
black holes I'm stepping into, I want to know that.
Yeah, so for that, you're not really, this is actually outside of BetterForms authentication. Okay, we'll put that totally aside.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
This is really Dean's app authentication on behalf of me. So for that, you show some kind of layout that's going to have the OAuth page. That's going to be their landing page. You grant that, that'll return temp token, which you got to go back to the backside and refetch.
Right.
It shouldn't be that should be totally doable, all of that stuff. That shouldn't
Okay.
be hard
That's
either.
my thinking.
Yeah.
That's my thinking. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can do it right in an iframe or in a modal or something like that. I would just do it in an iframe, and it opens up the that landing screen there. And that's outside. It's actually outside of Auth0 as well, because you're really doing this callback. The only thing you have to keep in mind is the callback you want would, Edward, I'm thinking it would go back to the API, the BF API, so that he could grab that data, because it's going to do a post, right? It's gonna try to call back his system somehow.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
You know what you can do, Dean? Bring it to a workshop, and we'll hack away at it, because it sounds kind of fun.
Okay. Okay.
I want to talk about. Has anybody played with DeepSeek? Have you heard about DeepSeek? Have you been under a rock?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's
Loaded
in all the news. Everybody's flipping out, right?
Right.
Everybody's going crazy. And I think the biggest thing is because it hit the news because NVIDIA took a big hit for a bit. And it's kind of wrong. It's totally wrong reasons. And it's lack of knowledge on the people who are in the control of things, I think, and the media as well. So DeepSeek is this model that's owned by a Chinese investment company. And long story is, or at least the story up until yesterday is they originally released this. The company does hedge fund trading, and they have their own AI research. So they have a whole bunch of GPUs, and they, as a side project, they said, hey, let's train our own let's train our own AI model, a reasoning model. Let's model it after OpenAI's O1. And more information is coming out now that first they said they didn't have all of these, they didn't have the latest NVIDIA chips, but then some videos showed up and they said, we are using the latest chips. Anyway, long story short, it's a distilled version of a model. And if you want to sort of understand what that is, imagine you take a huge dictionary. We'll call the dictionary a JPEG photo of a cat. And I can take that photo and I can see it's a cat sitting on a counter, right? This is what a distillation is. I'm just going to try to find a cat on a counter here. There we go. So I got this image here. Okay, that's a thing, but we'll find an image here. There. All right, so I got a picture of this cat on a counter. And everybody, we can all look at that picture and we can see that that's probably a kitchen counter, and we can see that there's tiles, and we can see there's a cupboard above, we can see drawers and things like that. This is a JPEG. I could have a really high resolution of this JPEG. And then at that point, you could tell if the grout was made out of concrete base or if it was clay-based grout, if there's such a thing, or silicone or something like that. Or I could have a really compressed version of this JPEG, and you can get almost all the same information. I can have it down to like literally 500K, or I can have it 2K, almost identical from some perspectives. And you can think of the LLM as almost the same kind of an idea. It's distilling that same information down. I could even reduce this fidelity a lot more, and I could make it some kind of Van Gogh pixelism type thing where it's just dabs, and if I kind of squint my eyes, I can see almost the same stuff, and my brain kind of fills out. That's effectively what this model is. So they have these models, and you can run them locally with this reasoning model. And I don't know if you played around with OpenAI's reasoning models, but the main gist of the model is it goes in shorter steps and it keeps thinking about it. It keeps talking about it. They use a fancy name called inference time or test time compute. It's basically throwing more CPU instead of at the data and training it more. It's running the machine more and seeing what kinds of outputs it produces. So there are some companies like if you want to try out the model, you can try it out on their site. I don't know if I would totally trust that. I wouldn't be throwing, if you're throwing social media stuff at it, who cares? And typical problems. But if you have some highly patentable thing and you're trying to test the the validity of your biological patent on a seed, I wouldn't be throwing it into that model for security. But what's neat about this model, because it's distilled, you can get a small one. The smaller the model, the less computation it requires. So you can run it on a local machine. So Ollama is a open source platform. You can think of this as like a Docker for LLMs, and you can basically run this as a command line. This app, you can download it. It's available in the 3 platforms, and it runs in terminal. And you can install, once you have it installed, it's really, really easy. It's a one-click install, and this is Ollama. This is not DeepSeek, okay? But they have the available models, and these are a number of open source models they have available here. And here's this DeepSeek one. So it comes in a bunch of variants, depending on how distilled it is. There's a 1.5 billion, 7, 8, 14, 32, 70, 67, or 671, sorry. So that's like full size, right? And they've distilled this. You can imagine a JPEG of all knowledge. Imagine a JPEG of all knowledge, and I can reduce that JPEG down into I can compress it effectively down into a 7 billion parameter and 1.5 billion parameter. Just to touch base on what parameters are. Parameters in a generative model, they're measured in a couple different ways, but they're basically attributes to talk about bits of information. And one way you can kind of think about this is, if I was going to talk about food, let me just see if I can find something here. We'll just go really quick here, quick primer and if this is a repeat of stuff for some people, bear with me here. Sorry, just a second here. Just find this. Trying to find trying to find do you guys remember this for the team? Do you guys remember what some of the text that was on that whimsical pizza? Okay. Pizza. Come on. Build a pizza order app. No. Parameters, streaming. Maybe it was under stream. Maybe it's under here. Maybe I put it under. Oops. Maybe I put it here. I'll just check one more time. Otherwise, I'll just redo it. It's not a big deal. No. Okay. All right. I don't see it. So here's the gist of arguments, or these parameters that you're always hearing about. Is I'm going to just talk about food because that's something we can all sort of relate to. And if you think about food, and I'm just going to draw on the screen here. If you think about, I'll just use this one. I have a metric, and we'll call it savory and sweet. And another type of metric that we could judge by food is it really more kids? Popsicle is more on the kid line or an adult. And let's talk about shape of food. Is it flat? Actually, this is one vector, flat, or round. With just those 3 parameters, I can actually describe quite a bit of different food. For example, Lin Chu mentioned pizza. Pizza is savory, so it's over here somewhere. It's kind of a little bit more adult than kid. And this is flat and round. It's super flat, right? But a cookie is sweet. It is very kid, but it's not perfectly kid. And like pablum would be super kid, right? Be very far in that direction. And alcohol would be very far on the adult side. And what do we have? This is flat and round. So what did I say? A cookie is pretty flat. So if you think of these things as vectors, if I drew this in 3-dimensional space, I could go like this, and I could represent cookie, pizza, apple, alcohol. I could represent a whole bunch of foods in this 3-dimensional space. So just make more spaces, and you can't mentally wrap your head around multiple dimensions. But if you take each one of these dimensions and separate them into a line, and we'll call this line that goes from 1 to -1, 0, -1, 1, we can put something on that number line. Okay. With these LLMs, about half of those parameters are these kinds of arguments. Is it related to health? Is it related to light and dark? All kinds of different parameters. The parameters aren't so articulated as such, but they're same kind of concept. So more parameters, you can represent more things. I can kind of, with these 3 parameters, I can kind of represent food. But if I would have given it to a healthy or not, let's say this is fattening, we'll call this next line, and healthy. Now I can actually discern the difference between, say, pizza and a it's also flat and savory, a crepe, right? It's almost the same, but the pizza, well, they're both not the greatest. But depending what's on the pizza now, might be slightly more healthy. So you get an idea. You can start to define these things by more parameters. So that's what the parameters are, right? There's a little bit more nuance to it. But about half of those parameters, when you hear these billion models and this different size models, there's how many of those arguments? Well, you can represent a lot of stuff with 5 billion arguments versus 670 billion arguments. You're already getting close to infinity from our mental model of, hundreds of arguments to describe certain things. Like a food, you could probably only come up with 50, maybe 100 parameters to describe a food. But hard and soft could be another one. Does it expire quickly or does it stay fresh, right? Is it cheap? Is it expensive? There's all kinds of parameters you can define. And once you have enough of those parameters, you can define almost anything. That's the gist. Incidentally, that's exactly what happens when you tokenize something. So let's jump over to DeepSeek. So that's these different models here. And to run those is really easy. Let me jump and switch to my terminal here. And I've already installed a couple of these models here, and you can see to run them, you just basically Ollama DeepSeek this, Ollama DeepSeek that. And it's pretty good because if I do this one here, and I just paste this in, if I don't have the model, I already downloaded this one, it will automatically download it and install it. You can figure out where it installs and just do the Google. It goes into some application folder somewhere on your hard drive. It's containerized. This model is just the model, right? It's not, I'm not giving DeepSeek access to everything here. But let's try it. Hello, tell me pros and cons of, I don't know, politics, becoming a, something like this. All right. So you can see it's pretty quick. This is all running locally on my Mac. This is an M3 Mac. And what's interesting is you start to read it. Okay, so I need to figure out the pros and cons. So it's actually starting to iterate over itself. First, let me think about what I know. Politicians do this, do that, and it's going on. And I also think about the public perception. What else is it getting onto? Pros. Now it's done the thinking section. You can see there's this thinking tag right here. I'm still not sure about all the details, though. Maybe I should look into specific examples. So it's kind of emulating all the stuff that it's knowledge that it's distilled down and how it's thinking. And it goes on and then it produces the pros and this output. So that's the output that one came from. To exit, just buy. And I should say, let me just copy what was it here? I'm just going to copy this. All right. And then let's jump to another model. And you get an idea. This is the 1.5. Just a second. What is the other one here? DeepSeek. Where's the DeepSeek R1 distilled coin 7B? So R1 7B. I think that one. R1 7B. Okay, so now we have this model. Let's try this one. Same thing. So this is the bigger, more parameter model, and you could start to compare. First thing you're going to notice is significantly slower, right? But it has more knowledge of things because it has that higher resolution of knowledge. So it'll end up producing that. The thought was that, oh, this is going to kill OpenAI. And, you know, there's that talk about the $500 billion data center that they're going to build somewhere and so on. And the good aspects are open source and distilling these models and being able to run them locally really does rock the boat for these companies that have this stuff entrenched. But these guys are really just ripping off what everybody else has done, taking it another step further. It's not reinventing, it's not revolutionary. The idea of distillation has been around for a while. And it certainly is not going to make us need less CPU or less GPU. You know, that's kind of like saying, well, we've invented the car now, and now we have more maybe a cheaper car. So we won't need as much gas. It's kind of almost the same logic. It doesn't make any sense that way. So there's the answer there. Came back kind of similar. I think you'd have to really compare it to see the difference. I've asked it pretty complex questions like find a brand new way to compute pi. This is one, and I've worded this a number of different ways, and it comes depending on how I worded it. It gets different results, but it'll go on for quite a while and explore a whole bunch of things. It ended up coming up with a result. I took that result because I don't know, I'm not great at math that way, at least not that level, and I pasted it into O1 on ChatGPT and I said, "Is this a brand new result? Is this a brand new way?" And it said, "No, it's not really brand new. It's based on this method." So it kind of derives something, but it wasn't really brand new. And that's okay. I wouldn't expect it to. With just a prompt, that'd be pretty good. So you can see it's going through all these different variations and things. So I guess the next question is it any good for us? Like, what can you use it for? It's running locally. So if you really have a true significant need for security, I'm not sure if, I know everybody claims they do, but I don't know if they totally do. If you're dealing with, like, I do have a friend of mine who has a patent company, and he does patenting of the gene sequences in seeds, and that's his specialty. So that's pretty competitive. Like, that's like Monsanto type companies and Pioneer and stuff like that. And there's some serious trade secrets within these chemical compounds and stuff. So that's something he's very conscientious about. He doesn't want to just blab it out anywhere and even say that he's researching this or that because of the potential for attacking. For us as in FileMaker community, I think maybe what we could use these generative type reasoning type models are is maybe throwing it a huge customer transaction and saying, here's the entire transaction in my CRM. What is a way I can target this customer for marketing that might be unique to that person based on these things? And it might be able to, might be able to look at all of these things. Jesse Roberts was on a few weeks ago or months ago, and he talked about how he's using AI to generate targeting plans, but reasoning models might be a little bit better for that, something like that. And now it's finally you can see how long it's going for. It's actually finally getting down to the output. I'm not sure if we've exceeded the context window. I don't think we have with this. It doesn't look like it's that big.
Charles, there was a really good YouTube, I think it was MSNBC or whatever, with the CEO of Perplexity and his take on this DeepSeek and shit, right? So they said, like he said, right, they're not really inventing anything, but he said, everything was copied off of Google stuff as well, right? So
Yeah.
the entire frickin' industry is copying from everybody else, right? So the thing that he said was significant was they banned the Chinese from getting all the best CPUs and shit, right? And it was like, the guys in Ukraine coming up with better drone weapons, right? With the limited amount of like tech that they had, right? And what these guys were able to do with the limited amount of chip power, right? And the lack of funding, right? In that sense, or less funding, let's just say, was mind blowing, right? So
you can become very resourceful when you have limited resources, right? So
if it's running locally though, is there any of that security question?
Not so much, no.
No, you don't go out, right? So the way I could see it being used is you'll take FileMaker's newest server, right? And any data set that goes into the database, and then you run this locally, right? You could have an entire system that's run without using, external data sources and stuff like that. So it'd be very secure.
So it'd be safe to use, but not through like their API or something like that.
Exactly. Their API apparently has been shown to be fairly insecure.
Yeah.
Just
Right? They're given to you. They're basically saying, here, it's open source and you can take it. Right. But that, again, it could change, right? Open source only means open source until somebody decides to change it later on, right? Which is what the guy at Perplexity said, right? He says, right now it's open, but but it was really interesting conversation, right? That they had with the guy.
So if it's open source and you download it though, then you'll always have that version of it. But then they could lock down like future versions of it. Is that what you're saying?
They
Right,
technically could. They could change the license, right? And then you don't necessarily have access to it, right? But the thing is, they can rerun the models really rapidly, right? Whereas these other guys are claiming, they take, huge amounts of time and CPU power and shit like that, right? And that's where all this questioning comes in, right? Do you really need to have all that power and money,
well, they really need to have that venture cap for sure.
Right. Well, not to the extent of the billions, right? That
Yeah.
these guys would raise it, because these guys did it with a couple of million or whatever like that, right? So it's like, wow, okay, that's freaking eye-opening, right? And so I just sort of said to one guy, I said, this is like the race to zero, right? For guys now, right? So
well, the thing is, so you look at the even just the interfaces, right? How we interact with chat. Let me give you an example of this. A year ago, we interacted with chat pretty straightforward. Now we already are starting to interact with it differently. For example, let me go back to here. I'm going to give it an explicit instruction here, but it can do this on its own when it feels that it's appropriate. I'm going to say open canvas, and it's opened up this area here, and I can actually open this up to the side. So we're interacting with we're discovering ways that we interact with AI. And and this is something that OpenAI is providing you. It's not just the LLM, right? They're providing a whole bunch of things, right? They're one of the first companies that have multimodal input that's widely available. They are not the first one to have this side panel of canvas. I think Claude did that before with their artifacts or whatever it's called. But those kinds of interfaces, they were the first ones to have an app that you can talk to, and that's pretty decent. And you can do a lot. You can do quite a thing. They are not the first ones to offer computer control. That's when the AI basically clicks on stuff on your computer. But they're the first ones to make it really publicly available and accessible. So they are still on the frontier of things. And that's something that I don't think you're going to see with these other companies. They're going to do as much. And it doesn't mean they can't by any means. Everybody can be scrappy, but there's still some value into these things. And I still trust this company in terms of security. It would be a massive screw up. Like if we found out we did find out just a couple of days ago that DeepSeek, they're apparently their AI or API is not super secure. If we found that out about, and they're using information for training about OpenAI, that would be devastating for the company, right? But we don't think twice about it when it's some other company, like the Chinese company kind of thing. It's not the bar is not as high, I think, or the expectation. So if you're a good math guru, there's some stuff here. This doesn't look too bad. I don't know. At the end of the day, it says it's like a 7/22 or 22/7 or whatever it is. It's like yeah, it's close enough. So I don't know if you've used this. This is pretty good for writing code in. Oh, just going back to this model too. I personally didn't find it all that great. Everybody's raving on about it. I don't know. Every time I've given it a question, it doesn't seem to listen to me very well. Like I've given it some obvious stuff, not really reasoning type questions. Seems to ramble off a lot with the reasoning ones, but the non-reasoning questions, it doesn't seem to be the greatest at. So it's not like an all-purpose. It's not an all-in-one model. It's definitely meant for deriving something. If you haven't, try it. Give it a try. It's really easy. It's like one command line from Olama, and then you just run it here, right? You can configure your Olama to have an API, and you could call it from your local FileMaker if you wanted to. I don't know why you do that. I think you should always do that stuff from the server, but you could do that.
That's really helpful to know. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Okay. I think I don't know if we've got anything else. I think that's it. Any other questions related to anything? Did Pearson go?
I'll just mention on a side note, like I have been using the AI in your legacy editor, and it is wild how I can just tell it what I want and it just rewrites it. Like, and I know you were demoing that earlier, but that to me is just wild. Just watch it rewrite everything for me. That's cool. That's really cool.
It's there's a bit of a trick, and this is something that we're working on different techniques, and even OpenAI hasn't really solved this yet. If you notice in their canvas, when you open up OpenAI's canvas, sometimes it'll rewrite the entire letter, and sometimes it'll see if I have it here. Sometimes it'll just edit something, like change step 3 to 3, I don't know, 3B. See if it does that. I don't know if it'll do this proper, but it'll sometimes just rewrite the one little part. There it goes. It's just rewriting that thing. But other times you'll say a small change and it'll go rewrite the whole thing. It's kind of tricky to target something in there. How do you match up and say, I want to change just this part to the remote device? We do it through IDs under the hood, and we'll maybe have a separate call on this, but we do it through an ID we target. If I go back to BetterForms here, and we're doing it that way. But there's another technique that uses regular expressions to target things. So one of the things you'll see with the new editor is you'll see everything will have an ID here. And even if you were to delete this, it'll automatically regenerate it again as well. But that ID allows us in the editor to identify all the elements. So we have to have some information there. And that's what the AI uses. It targets that particular ID. So the next version will probably use some regex method, and then it can narrow in and can just make the changes more precision and insert the changes where it needs to be, which is more ideal. Pearson, did you present?
No, not yet. I was waiting for my for the
It
handoff.
wasn't in the slide, so sorry about that. We'll have our UX corner. Pearson's gonna take it away.
Sure.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, no worries. Saving best for last. I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying out this the new Figma slides, so just bear with me while I get this set up. I think that I can share this page. There we go. You guys see my screen? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, well thanks for joining us everybody. And I just want to talk about something that I've touched on in the past in another former Friday Live, but the usability heuristics from the Nielsen and Norman group, who are kind of the founders or grandfathers, you could say, of UX and the research behind what makes good user experience. So they have these 10 heuristics: visibility of system status, match between systems and real world, 8 others. And those are kind of the foundations, or they call them the 10 heuristics of UX design. So I want to focus on the first one. I've talked about error prevention before, but I think this is a good kind of series that I could talk about. And so in the context of visibility of system statuses. You can think about the systems around you right now or in your everyday life, and everything has its own system and its own way of telling you the status of that device, of the workflow that you're using. So that could come in the form of, your phone showing you the battery life remaining on your phone. That's the system telling you how much time you have before you have to charge it. Your email inbox tells you with a little blue dot which emails you haven't read yet. Even the highway signs let you know how far your next exit is. So all of these little nuggets of information allow you as the user to accurately assess the current state of the systems that you're interacting with. So whether you're building anything from software to city infrastructure, this principle helps users stay informed and in control. In software, if your system doesn't communicate things clearly, users can get lost, frustrated, and maybe even abandon the product or software entirely. So let's explore a little bit more about what this means and why it matters and how we can do it right. So what is visibility of system status? What does that mean? Well, the visibility of system status exposes the cause and effect so that we can understand what the system is doing and decide how we want to respond. At its most basic level, it might look like a piece of text telling the user what is currently going on. For example, in this case, this was 16 of my email conversations I had selected, and I started to drag it. This is what it's telling me. Um, just it telling me I have 16 of these conversations. I'm dragging them, and that gives me the ability to move them. So it can get a lot more complex from here. That's just a simple example, especially in niche enterprise products with system-specific functionalities. There's a lot to consider. So in order for users to respond to the UI effectively, they always need to know what is happening. Your app should communicate progress, errors, system changes, um, everything like that in real time. You can imagine, and I'm sure this has happened to all of us at one point using bad bad applications or bad software. You click something, nothing happens. Do you click it again? Are you supposed to wait? If you refresh, is that going to make you lose progress? All of those uncertainties can cause frustration, and good UX is meant to remove that guesswork. So in this case, this is kind of like a rule of thumb that this person made a diagram of. If something takes less than a second, there's no need to fill in that waiting time. It's happening instantly. If something's going to take a second to 3 seconds, you might want to indicate that there's an indeterminate progress happening. Um, Longer than that, 3 to 10 seconds, you might want to determine, or you might want to show exactly the progress of when this is going to be done. And if there's something really big, like you're downloading a file, maybe even tell them how long it might take. Usually they give those indicators like 1 minute remaining, 5 minutes remaining. Here they have like a percentage. So those are just some, that's just like a basic rule of thumb you could take into consideration. This also includes providing appropriate feedback. So when users don't get feedback, they can feel lost. If they don't know whether an action has worked, they might repeat it, refresh the page, or abandon the task entirely. So it's our job as developers or designers, people who are creating these softwares, we need to let the users know when the interaction succeeds. It can be as simple as changing the color of an element once something is selected. Like here, we have just a bunch of tags, and even as viewers not using the product, but we can see clearly 4 of these have been selected, and they're communicating that through just changing colors, changing the icon from a circle or an empty circle to a check mark, or even a progress indicator like I talked about in the last slide, just showing that there are you've taken an action and now things are happening behind the scenes. So when you provide clear feedback, users will feel confident, in control, and they will learn to trust your system, which is important. And this reduces errors and improves the overall experience. So now that you are indicating a task has succeeded, um, you use the check mark, you change the color, you add a generic message. Is that enough though? An example like here, sure, you have the task has been completed successfully, but sometimes a little more clarity can help tell users more about the information that is happening. So, in this case, maybe this was a queue of items being uploaded. Task completed successfully 3 times in a row. You don't know which one is successful. You kind of just are trusting that the system knows what it's doing, but you have no idea what actually happened. So adding some clarity, adding the document title, it's been uploaded to this specific project. Looks like with the underline, maybe you could even click that. Those are some added pieces of information to add clarity and help the user understand more of what's happening. It's a good start to let them know that something is happening. But certain areas you might want to add more clarity. So a well-crafted microcopy can add that, um, as we see in the second image example. Another part of visibility in system statuses is the unavoidable errors that can occur when any system is being used. It's going to happen whether human or system errors. Those need to be communicated in order to help the user resolve the issue and hopefully hopefully avoid those issues entirely in the future. So clear system statuses give users immediate feedback when they make errors and offer easy error recovery. So here we want to recognize and prevent those errors. We have the message at the very top saying that one of these fields is incorrect or invalid. Please follow the examples in order to continue. We have another indication here showing exactly which item it has an error, and it gives instructions on how to resolve that error. The email address must include an @ here we see that email, they forgot to add the include the at Gmail, at Hotmail, whatever. So we offer an easy error recovery to help the user understand what exactly went wrong, how they can avoid that in the future. And the level of obtrusiveness with those messages can vary between the message that you're trying to communicate. So not all system statuses are created equal. While you usually want to avoid creating friction in the workflow and obstruct the user from the rest of the interface, sometimes the system does require putting a message front and center in front of the user. The timing and frequency of these messages should be taken into account. Something that happens constantly, like this autosave message here, if it's happening constantly, it doesn't need to be thrown in their face every 2 minutes. But a major and infrequent action, something that might happen just once during onboarding, or it might be a pop-up every month or so, those are justified with taking over the whole page until maybe a button is pressed to dismiss that message. So something like this, like I said, it could be from, just an onboarding workflow where, it's only going to happen for a new user a few times, or if they create a new account, these messages don't need to be so hidden. They can be a little more in their face. But something like an autosave, you don't need to be told explicitly, or you don't need to be that doesn't need to be brought to your attention as urgently as something else might have to. So that can just be a more of a subtle message to let you know that yes, things are saving. You're still connected to the internet. You're not going to lose your information. So there are levels to how obtrusive you want these messages to be. Next, I want to talk about these paired actions. Some system status updates are best paired with an action. When a destructive or transformative change has been triggered, the action could be to undo that action, or to undo the what you just performed, which incidentally also serves as another heuristic principle that maybe I'll talk in another talk in another Friday Live, and that is the error recovery heuristic. Other actions could be next steps to help the user along their workflow, which are opportunities for guidance and onboarding. So platforms that allow bulk actions to be executed, like I showed at the very beginning, moving multiple emails into a folder or in this case, three of these users in this list have been archived. If these bulk actions can be executed, there's often an undo action paired with the success execution, which helps with error recovery. So, you might have had 5 items selected at the top, scrolled down, and selected one more, and forgot that you had so many other items selected, and you deleted them all. You've deleted 6 items when you only meant to delete one. We want to give that option to undo those actions, because it could take a long time manually to recover those, um, depending on what that workflow is. And lastly, I just want to show some more examples of what these system statuses could look like. So in this case, we have a multi-step form, and we want to show that progress indicator, showing them here you've completed the one step, you're on the second step, there's just one more to go. So you're not leaving the users in the dark of how long is this form going to be? How long might this take? You might even include an estimated completion time at the top somewhere, just to say, hey, the average person might spend 15 minutes on this. So if you don't have that much time, maybe save this for later. We have another loading indicator here, telling you that 5 projects have been initiated in their analysis of some kind. So we want to show them that something is happening. We're estimating time remaining, even letting them know we're going to tell you how much time is remaining, but we have to calculate that a little bit first. So just making sure that people have these breadcrumbs of information to help them understand what is happening behind the scenes. Something that I'm sure most of us are familiar with. These are kind of statuses in a table. Letting us know what letting us know at a glance certain information that we might want to see without having to look at all the other data that can take a long time to analyze all at once. And lastly, just another paired action here. We have 5 items were selected. That is the status, or the system status, telling the user some information and pairing it with an action item. Based on whatever that action is, it might be just useful to have them have the button there right in the message itself. So that's just my little spiel on the first heuristic of the 10 listed by the Nielsen and Norman group. They're a fantastic resource for anybody who has just general questions about UX or those design principles. They cover more the principles and the theories behind it without getting too much into the designy creative side. So if that's not your if that's not your forte, or that's not what you're particularly interested in, I think it's still a very interesting topic to learn about from these guys. Does anybody have questions or comments before we move on?
I've got to jump to another meeting, but this has been really, really great stuff. And Pearson specifically, I've been to a lot of Claris Engages, and their interface stuff, their interface sessions are generally, I don't generally walk away with much of anything. And if you were to do a session, I would love it. I know it might be too late this year, but I really appreciate the stuff you're talking about here. It's very helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll actually be speaking at the event in Toronto that Charles mentioned at the beginning of this talks, or at the beginning of this session. So yeah, if you're in Toronto or you have some free time, I think it's in May, then I'll be there.
Yeah, I will. I'll talk to the boss about getting up there. I'm in Arkansas, but I'll talk to the boss about getting up to Toronto. So
Awesome.
sweet.
Yeah, this will all be melted by then. Hey, Pearson, does this, how does this interface into this kind of interface into the AI assistant?
I think this would be something that the AI assistant would be able to help with. So let's say you have, I guess, just letting the AI assistant know. Let me find something like, I wonder if you could have these inputs on a form, for example, and then ask the assistant to create error states for them. Charles, is that something that
Yeah, you could do that. There's a few different ways. I'm just wondering what the best one is. But you can certainly, depending on like if this error comes from the database, the back end, like those are like missing information, but some of those other errors were coming from the server, right? Like some status or process. You can certainly create an element for that, and you can create the modals. I just actually grabbed a screenshot of one of Pearson's things and made a quick modal that you could use as well. So
yeah.
I think you have to look at it as the little widgets.
Mhm. But yeah, I think with the AI assistant, it can help you maybe remove that creative side from the task that you're trying to complete. So if you know that, on this page, you have a bunch of tags and you need them to be selectable, and you don't necessarily want to think about what color should it be, what should the icon change to, how should it look. Maybe that's where the AI assistant comes in, where you say, this is what I want. I know that I need to show a visual representation of a selected item. Tell the AI assistant to do that for me. Um, it'll pick out the color. It'll pick out, the stylistic changes to make it look interactive, and takes that task off your hands as a developer who might not have a designer's, you know, same kind of thought process.
Right. And I get it. I can barely draw a straight line. So Charles and I could, sink in a boat together. But if you go to, I think it was maybe your next slide where you had the progress indicator, no, beyond that, one more, another one, that one. So the upper
Right.
left-hand one there, could we ask the AI assistant to help us with that 1, 2, 3 thing, and what kind of terms would we use for that? Or
Yeah.
is this something with it's kind of trial and error?
Yeah, I can show you that one when once Pearson's done. I'll show you how to do that really quick.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe if anybody else
Well, no,
has.
and the
Oh, yeah.
question is not can I do it by continually prompting, but is there a high level way where we can let the AI assistant kind of do like you did, Charles, when you captured the Airbnb page and did the
Yeah.
cat house?
Yeah, Yeah, you could take a snapshot of various progress indicators and say, hey, make this. And then you might have to make some adjustments and things, like little things, but should be a pretty close version. And then you'll have to think about it. AI is never going to, no matter how good it gets, it's not going to, you're still going to have some knowledge of something. For example, we all think
For sure.
we all use Google, right? And then there's a skill, and Google's been around for a decade, but there's a skill to searching for something. And some people just don't know what to search. They just search for the bad terms and they can never find anything. And somebody else can come and use it. And that's a super common tool, right? Even a calculator for that matter, super common, but not everybody can use it well and calculate percentages.
Yeah.
And things like that. So you still have to have some basal knowledge of stuff. For progress bars, you have to think, okay, there's a state. What determines the first set, second set? The AI can help you and create a state object, but you have to think, okay, what is the conditions to get to that next one and things like that. You'll still have to add some of that, but you can go pretty far otherwise.
Yeah, what intrigues me is the visual impact of that, not the mechanics. I know what step 1, 2, and 3 are, but and the flags for that, and can understand that. But to make it look pretty, and it occurred to me as I just asked the previous question was, well, we'll just do a screenshot and say, make it look like that. It's like, so that's the helpful part for me.
Yeah, and as LLMs, as the visual aspect increases, then the ability for them to see detail in things increases quite a bit as well, and that makes a big difference. We actually, when you do take an image in BetterForms, we actually route it to a different model. Most of the time it's 4.0 mini, but sometimes it's 4.0 for images because it's just you need that. It's just a little bit better. Cool.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Great. Well, I'll pass the screen back off to you, Charles.
Super. Thank you. That was great, Pearson. I just did this real quick. I took a screenshot of Pearson's, one of his modals, and I just pasted it into I created a new block, and it actually turned the element into a modal. You'd have to have visibility and control that if you wanted to do that, but I just created a default. And you could do the same thing with the AI assistant and progress bars and things like that too. So let's go on to our next step here. We're almost done here. We're going to go into our draw. I'm going to actually end our recording right now, so we won't put everybody's names on there all the time. Try not to do that as much. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month. I'm not sure what we're doing, but we'll figure it out by then, hopefully. Ciao.